Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
To remind God that He writes my script. He runs my life. And I promise to do what those masters and old-timers told me to do when I was new. Be sure and listen. I might hear something that would surprise me. I might even hear something I could use. Well, I said I'm an alcoholic. I'm a very grateful alcoholic. God, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that the Jim Beam held out. I loved the taste of it. I loved it straight. I didn't mix it with nothing. I laughingly say I never bought anything but a fifth. I was never having my last half pint. And I bought the fifth, and I took the cork out, and I threw it away. I was never going to need it again. Stuff wasn't going to spoil, and it sure as the dickens wasn't going to spill. I had a good firm hold on it. I'm a only child. Product of a family who was in the church every time the doors were open, and so was I. Spent all my younger years learning to be a very good parent pleaser, so I'd know how to be a people pleaser when I got here. Lived an extremely dull life, really. It was a life like a walking zombie. I've said many times, by the time I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a walking zombie, and had I known how sick I was, I'd have been way too ashamed to arrive, but thank God I didn't know. And as I looked back, as I was able to sort of look back, I realized I'd sort of lived my life pretty much as a zombie as it was. As I said, I was an extreme parent pleaser. Never occurred to me. I hear people talk about cutting classes and all these kind of wonderful, exciting little things. Not only did I didn't do them, I never even thought about them. Well, marshmallows hadn't fully developed by that point in time. And it wasn't until I got away from home and left Minneapolis, and came to California and started looking for some friends, and God saw to it that I found the kind of friends who were going to enjoy the kind of things that I was going to learn how to enjoy, and find out what was going on out there in what I thought maybe was a dull world, but I'd like to know it for myself. And so I started drinking, and I loved the taste of it from the get-go. I never diluted my booze down with anything. I always thought it was a disgrace to dilute down something that was already good. I don't dilute my coffee down. I like it. And I didn't dilute Jim Beam down, and I drank Jim Beam right up until the end. When I sort of mixed some Kamchatka in it, the only reason I drank Kamchatka was because I thought that the poor peons with whom I drank couldn't pronounce it. I mention that only for the pure and simple reason it sort of gives you a slight idea that I had just a tad of ego. And I haven't lost it all, and I have no intentions of losing it all. A degree of ego is, in my estimation, and anything I tell you tonight, you can quote me, but it doesn't make it so. I have a million opinions, and I stick with each one of them until somebody proves to me that they're wrong. And when they do, I'm far from being over the point of saying, sorry, okay, you proved me wrong, I'm wrong, I'll change. Why fight it? Why fight it? But anyway, I did. I had a terrific ego. And anyway, I came to California, and I came out here, a young man and I were starting to date in Minneapolis, and he was going to be drafted, and so he wanted to come to California. He thought maybe the draft board would lose his number. And I don't know, they probably would have, but we came out here and he was going to find a job instantly, and somehow he never quite got around to it. So you know who went to work. And at that time, it was during the war, and that's not the Civil War, by the way, Lockheed was hiring anybody that could lie well enough and was breathing, and I got a job. And I worked there for some time, and he still didn't seem to be able to find anything to do except play pool down at the Blarney Stone down the street. And he told me he was playing for the house, but it somehow always cost me so much money that I couldn't quite buy the story. Because by this time I had learned to do some drinking too, and I wasn't having too much trouble at that point in time. Then I ran onto the man who, if anybody had to teach me how to drink, he was the one who did it. But then he had carte blanche reasons for drinking. His name was Joseph Patrick Murphy, and he was born on the 17th of March. He worked at the shipyards, and he convinced me that Lockheed wasn't good enough for me, or I wasn't for them, or whatever. I don't know what he convinced me of. It didn't really matter. He convinced me that he needed somebody to help him drive, because we lived in Sherman Oaks, Sepulveda, and Ventura. And I had met him at the, there was a bar in that corner. It isn't there anymore. I don't remember the name of it. Sometimes my memory just sort of goes out the window. The marshmallows melt like they were being held over a bonfire, and I can't really... Hitching post! Knew it had come to me. That's where I'd met him, and as I say, he convinced me that he needed somebody to ride with him, and so I drove the old Sepulveda over to the shipyards and worked the shipyards up until there was sort of a feeling inside that we probably were about to lose our jobs. We thought they might be a little unhappy with the fact that Mondays were a little hard to catch up with. And even if we managed to get over the pass, and as I say, this is the old Sepulveda, this is not freeway days. And we got that far. That's also the days, and maybe they still use it, of the elevated bridge, and we'd get there, and if by the time we got to that point, the bridge had to go up to let some boat go through, we would say, oh, that's a sign from God. We're not supposed to work today. So we opened the glove compartment, opened the bottle, made a U-turn, and went back home, you know. What the heck? It was a wonderful life. It was a wonderful life. I'm glad I did it. I will tell you that as of the 10th of last month, I was 75 years old, and I can stand here today and tell you that there are not 30 seconds of any part of those 75 years that I'd change. Not a single one. Now let me tell you about them. Now I'm not going to tell you an awful lot about the drinking, because I doubt if there's more than 4 or 5 people here who need to be taught how to drink. And if they do, I have a feeling there's plenty of people here who can teach you. Your leader gave you sort of a slim idea of what can happen, you know, just about so much. So I won't tell you a heck of a lot about it. As I said, I was a pig. I was a heavy drinker. I finally met the man that I was to marry in 1949. He had a machine shop. I was drinking heavily at that point in time, but somehow kept it sort of under control. So I said he had a machine shop, and I went to work with him, and I worked the big heavy equipment that he had in his shop. I also kept the office. I kept the books. The accountant never told me he couldn't make 2 and 2 4 out of my books. He never complained. Yet by this time I had come to the point where my routine was come 2 in the morning, run to the kitchen, drop some pots and pans so Roy wouldn't hear me taking the cork out of the bottle, get that drink that's going to sort of put life in the old body, and then start in from there. He was disapproving, but not vehemently at this point in time. There were, of course, plenty of bottles hidden in the machine shop. Those drinks at home would get me to the shop, and then from there, he never could figure out why the bottom of my filing cabinet got so rusty, but it did. I don't know. I told him, I guess I spilled coffee because I went around with a coffee cup in my hand. Anyway, I spent a number of years working in that machine shop. Got all my fingers, all my toes, didn't have a single... Yeah, I had one accident. I ran a drill through one of my thumbs and thought that was kind of dumb, so I didn't do that anymore. I was driving every day. I was doing deliveries, picking up materials, etc. The miracle being that by the time I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had never had an accident and I had never had a ticket, and I was on the freeways, the highways, and the city streets every single solitary day. I don't remember much past the 10 o'clock, as I told you. My last 3 years, I stood on the podium and heard myself say this one night. That's why when my masters told me to be sure and listen, I'd be amazed at some of the things I'd hear if I would allow God to write my script, which he does. I heard myself say, you know, by the time I quit, I was doing 3/5 a day, 7 days a week, and that's a lot of booze. So I went home and I said to the husband, who did not drink, he loved his trade, he knew perfectly well that booze and being an instrument maker and a machinist did not mix, and he loved his trade with a passion. And until he finally started losing his eyesight and had to have open heart surgery and a few other things and retired, he would have a drink, don't misunderstand me, but not the way his wife drank. I drank enough for he and me and us together and what have you. And I went home and I said, you know, Roy, I heard myself say that I was drinking 3/5 a day, 7 days a week. Now that's ridiculous, isn't it? And he said, I got the proof, and if any of them want to argue with you, you send them to me. I will tell them that's the way you were drinking. Believe me. He said, why do you think I was giving you all these lectures? And I said, what lectures? Lectures? He used to say, because he went to Al-Anon after he finally got me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've heard him say in Al-Anon, I wish I'd taped some of those lectures. They were absolute masterpieces, just masterpieces. I could have bound them and sold them. But I didn't really hear them, didn't really, until the day was to come one day when he said to me, Doris, you have had your last drunk as my wife. I am tired of the fact that I always can figure out where to find you, either on the bed, under the bed, or in the back of the walk-in closet. If I open the back door and listen and you've been home long enough, I'll be able to hear where you are, because if you're starting to pass out, you snore better than any man has ever been able to snore, believe me. In fact, he said, there are a couple of things I did. He told me this after I was intelligent enough to hear him. He said, I came home one day and you were doing this snoring job, cutting down all these redwoods, you know, and of course the booze behind it. And he said, and I walked in and he said, I was so infuriated, and there was a bottle of Jim Beam sitting beside the bed. He said, and I walked over and I thought, damn her, if I take this bottle and the mouth wide open, you know, I'm sure I was a queen of the beauty parade. And he said, if I just take this bottle and I start pouring, she's going to choke on it. They'll never know the difference, and they'll always know she died drunk. There'll be no recrimination. And he said, and I really meant it. And I said, and you'd probably have been right. So he said, what I did is I took the bottle and I started pouring. And he said, you know what she did? She was a good alcoholic. She just swallowed and swallowed and swallowed and swallowed and swallowed. Nothing ever happened. He said, one other time I came home and you were floating on that pool that I had built for you because I thought you needed more exercise. He said, you're laying out there on that float. And he said, I know you're bombed out of your skull. You don't even know where you're floating, what you're floating on. And he said, I got so mad and I walked over at the edge of the pool, and laying along the edge was this leaf basket that you scoop the leaves out. He said, I thought to myself, if I put that right in her stomach and I push her down the drain, they'll know she drowned an alcoholic death. And he said, nobody will ever know any different. And he said, and it's exactly what I did. And he said, when I got her down to the drain, she just kind of wriggled and she came back out and she went right on floating, never even knew anything had happened. I have no recollection of either one of these incidences to this day, believe me. Anyway, as I say, the day came when he said, you've had your last drunk as my wife, Doris. And he said, you're going to have to do something. And I said, something maybe you people never had to say. I'll do anything. Well, anything turned out to be going to our doctor. My doctor didn't particularly approve of people who didn't have willpower. He thought that it was willpower was our problem. He didn't know that it was won't power. But anyway, he sat across that desk, and I am a firm believer that God ran my life, all of my life, with and without my permission. I told you I came from a family that was in church. I knew all the right words. I taught Sunday school. I taught vacation Bible school. I did all of these things, and I knew the right words. And there was a time I could have quoted you chapter and verse. And I said, quoted. Feelings, no. Because I didn't know God's address until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and Get Sober, and we'll get to that. But nevertheless, I just knew the words, no feelings. I didn't have the spiritual vibrations. I had the religious education. You may be religious and spiritual. You need not be both. My opinion again. So, I am a firm believer that God was sitting across that desk with my doctor. And doctor said to me, Doris, I don't know about alcoholics. He said, I understand there's a pill. He said, I don't approve of it. I won't give it to you, but I'll give you the name of a man who will if you want to try. I didn't know he was talking about anti-abuse, but he was. He said, there's also psychiatry. It's a very expensive route. I don't know if you can handle this one, if you can cut the mustard on it. But he said, I'll give you the name of the best one I know if you want to try this route. Then he said, there's one other thing I just remembered. He said, I understand, and this is in 1947 in August. He said, I understand there's an organization called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I understand that it's free, and that all you have to do is go and be willing to help someone else who is sick when you get well. He said, I don't like to recommend something I don't know anything about. Would you please do me a favor? Would you be kind enough to go and check them out and come back and tell me if they're worth my remembering? And so I got out of the chair and I said, yes, doctor, I'll go and do research for the medical profession just for you. And so I came to Alcoholics Anonymous to do research for the medical profession. Now, strangely enough, God allowed me to be able to simply stop the drinking and go to a meeting the following Sunday. God allowed it. From what I'd been drinking, God allowed it. It's the only way it could possibly be, no other way. I went to that Sunday morning meeting. I live in Pacoima. I've lived in Arleta. I live in San Fernando area, well, way over the yonder, 50 miles on the other side of somewhere. And so I went to this Sunday morning meeting in Pacoima, and Pacoima happens to be an extremely poor group. They're not the richest group in the world today. I was telling one of the girls, I think I was telling, at that point in time we were meeting in a little house and the rent was $82 a month. And there were many times that we had to take the collection a couple of times the week before that we had to pay the rent, or we never possibly could have made it, believe me. Anyway, there were no fans, there were no air conditioners, there were no exhausts, there was no nothing. And it was, as I said, August, and it's 1957. And I think it's the hottest Sunday God ever created on the face of the earth. I think he thought he was going to bake this alcoholic clean. I'm not sure. Because I know that I went in my new Chrysler New Yorker station wagon, and I walked in, and I had showered and cleaned up and done my best, and I looked ready for the Rose Parade. I sat in that front row, and I didn't sit there too long when I suddenly began to think that what I was smelling was not the Chanel No. 5 that I had put on before I left home. Believe me, it wasn't. Well, anyway, I stuck it out, and by the grace of God and by God's direction, for some strange reason, I thought these people were kind of weird and kind of strange, but for some reason or other, I would leave the meeting and tell them how wonderful it was to be here, and everything was wonderful, and I'm so glad they allowed me to be here. Well, then they finally made a mistake in a couple of months, and they let me on the podium. And when I got on the podium, I remember twice, they tell me there was more than that, but I don't know if they're just giving me a bad time, and I don't care. I stood up on that podium and I said, I want you people to know that I came here to give you a little bit of class. Nobody threw anything. Nobody said, Doris, why don't you, go somewhere else? Didn't say a word. And I kept going back, and this extreme ego, we had to put a new roof on that building, and so, of course, I was there to supervise. I didn't want them to do a bad job. And when we put a new floor in it, I was there to supervise that, and when we painted, I was there to supervise that. There were professionals doing it who were members of the group, but, somebody's got to watch these people because you don't know what these people are going to do, and so I supervised everything that happened in that group. Just shy of 2 years for some strange reason. Now, I told you that I was able to quit just like that, okay? To the best of my knowledge, I did quit just like that. I don't know. Let's put it that way. Just shy of my 2nd birthday, I was coming home from the shop one day. I jumped out of the car, I went in the kitchen. We still did our company entertaining at the house. I know in 20/20 hindsight what I did. I didn't do it consciously, but I know. I walked into the kitchen, I picked up a water glass, I poured a water glass full of vodka, I went into the bedroom, I put on my bathing suit, I went out, I drank it, I sat down at the edge of the pool, and by the time my husband, who was behind me, walked onto the patio, I was falling into the pool, and that time I might have hit the drain and not come back up. I don't know. He called some people, of course, and I spent the next day, July 1st, pacing that patio, never so sick, never so sick. Couldn't stand still, couldn't sit still, couldn't lie down, didn't know what I wanted to do. Wasn't sure whether I was going to live or die, and wasn't real sure which was the one I wanted. In fact, I think I kind of hoped that I would suddenly just drop dead. Living didn't seem to be quite that important. At that point in time, I was so miserable and so sick. Now, I have the firm belief that somewhere along the line, as a matter of fact, I asked my husband, whether wasn't I sneaking a drink here and there. I was a sneak. I don't know about you, but I was a sneak, and I was a liar, and I was a cheat, and I was all of these damn things, you know. And I was a good sneak. I didn't do anything halfway ever in my life. I didn't drink halfway. I didn't sneak halfway. I didn't do from nothing halfway. I didn't get sober halfway either. And so I said to my husband, do you think maybe that I was sneaking a drink? He said, how in the hell would I know? You're such a liar, a cheat, and a thief that I wouldn't know what you were doing. He said, is it important? And I said, no, I guess it isn't. Anyway, I thought I was going to die from that drunk coming off of it. And as I paced that patio that day, and it was a hot day, oh God, it was hot. And all of a sudden, finally, in utter tears, I fell to my knees on the flagstone patio and lost all the skin on my knees, which didn't matter, and cried out in, dear God, I want to be sober more than I want to be anything else, and I cannot do it alone. Please, God, help me. I surrender, run my life. And as I did, and as I looked across the pool at the block wall, I saw the face of Christ on that wall, and I knew within me that I had totally surrendered. I knew that was all. I knew I wasn't ever going to have to take another drink. Now, I have to believe, for me at least, that it takes proof in 20/20 hindsight. From that day, July 1st of 1959, to this day today, the thought of taking a drink has never occurred. And consequently, those who have to listen to me in bits and pieces or all the time or whatever, poor Pacoima, hear me say, with total surrender goes the obsession. It will work for booze, it will work for pills. I don't know anything about pills. It will work for food, it will work for, they tell me some other things you people get obsessed about. Of course I don't. With total surrender goes the obsession. I have never given a thought to a drink from that day to this, and my life has been as normal as yours has. It's been like yours. My mother and I had trouble getting along, needless to say, because of course Mother didn't quite approve of my kind of a life. She didn't understand. She wasn't unforgiving. She wasn't a difficult woman, but she didn't understand. We are a tad difficult to understand, in case nobody ever told you. And those people, and I don't like the word normal because nobody's ever proven to me what normal is. But those people who do not have to live under anesthetic all of their lives will never understand us for the pure and simple reason they can't quite comprehend why we had to take 1,000 drinks we didn't want to take. Maybe you didn't, but I did. I took 1,000, a million drinks I didn't want or intend to take. I would pour that drink in the morning or grab that bottle in the morning and say, I'm just going to have one today. And the voice as clear as yours or anybody else's would say to me, hey, you know that's not so, Doris. You know there's going to be more. I would get to where I turned around to see who was telling me, but I knew there wasn't going to be a stopping. But I stopped on July 1st of 1959. Okay, as I told you, my mother and I had trouble. Mother used to come out from Minnesota in the winters. My father was dead. She used to come out in the winters because Minnesota winters were getting a little too difficult for her. And the last time she came out, she was 80. She was in very good health. I was about 7 years sober. sober this time. The first 2 years were dry. That was not sobriety. I worked no program, nothing. But you see, when I surrendered on July 1st of 59, I found out two important things. I found out I didn't have to drink, that's true, but I found God's address. And I turned my life and my will over to the care of God, hoping to learn more and more each day of how to understand Him. I knew He was there. I never doubted His existence. I never doubted His ability to run my life. I have never taken my life back. My will, that's something else. I borrow it every once in a while. And you know what I find out? I do just as crappy a job as I ever did. So I don't keep it quite as long. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less long. I have established for me an expression that, again, everybody's used to hearing me. God in every sentence, God at every turn of the road. I don't have hunches, I have God hunches. I don't have ideas, I have God ideas. I have to put God in every sentence. When I go out to get into my truck, I drive a big Ford pickup truck. When I go out to get into my truck, or if it happened to be a car, as I open that door, I physically step back, and I do it on purpose. I want to be a lady driver. I want God to get in first because I don't want to go anywhere that He isn't going to go with me. I don't want to drive my car without Him. And by doing that physically, it reminds me, you know. Sure, supposedly I'm bright enough to be able to say, get in first, God. If I don't do it, that means I'm doing it half measures. So I step back. Sometimes I step on my friends' toes that are standing behind me. They say, what are you doing? And I said, I'm letting God in first. What else? I had, when my husband started losing his sight and he gave up the machine shop, I had gone to work in an electronic plant over by General Hospital. And so I was leaving for work at 4 o'clock every morning. Loved my job, worked until the day I was 70, just absolutely adored it. Missed it like crazy. Where were we, God? Somewhere here. Oh, so Mother used to come out every year, and she came out this particular year. We had a whole bunch of friends that came over to the house. We were all amateur musicians. My husband had played every and all instruments. Oh, I'll just quickly intersperse. When his eyesight went and he could no longer be a machinist, he sold his shop, and he said, you know, I was raised in San Francisco, and they used to have some of the best wines up there. I think now that I'm retired, I can have a little bit of wine. Fine. He said, you will buy it for me? I said, I'll buy it for you. I bought Red Mountain Vin Rosé by the case and brought it home. I'm not going to, neglect him for crying out loud. He was a wonderful husband. There were times I didn't think so, and there were times I missed it, and there were times I used to say, God, why couldn't I have had a knight in shining armor? I guess it's because I couldn't ride the horse. What the heck? So, anyway, he started drinking, and it took him just about 2 months with that Red Mountain Vin Rosé to drink himself into Alcoholics Anonymous and out of Al-Anon. And Al-Anon was real happy to see him go because they didn't care about that perfume. They were a little tired of smelling Vin Rosé. But anyway, he learned to love the program just as much as I did, every bit as much. Anyhow, he was had an orchestra way back, and he loved to play instruments, and so he was playing the electric organ. We were playing honky-tonk, country western, whatever. And my mother came over to me and she said, Doris May, I hated that May. I had trouble getting rid of it. She said, would you do me a favor? Would you come along and tuck me in? I'm going to go in and lay down. I can hear the music from my bedroom. And I said, fine, because her bedroom was on down the hall. But I did think it was a little bit strange. And so I went along with her. She got into bed. I tucked her in and I said, I'm going back, but I will be back. And she said, I know you will. Okay. So I went back out and we went on playing, and I finally got a God hunch, go check on your mother. Now, I sincerely believe this. May sound silly to you, and I really don't care. I don't care at all. But I got this God hunch, and I went down the hall, and Mother was sitting up in bed, and I said, are you all right? And she said, yes, but I knew you were coming. Oh, okay. She said, I have a message for you. She said, this, my dear, is dying. And it's one of the most beautiful things that happens in anybody's life. She said, it is the reward we get for doing the best we can with our lives. She said, don't ever be afraid. Don't ever try to shirk it. Nobody's going to miss it. And believe me, it's beautiful and quiet and peaceful. And you have to earn it. And from this, I picked up an expression which I have used a million times since. Death is the Emmy we get for good living, for the performance we put on here. But as she said it, I said, Mother, you can't. We've just learned to be friends. She said, that's all right. Listen. And I stopped to listen, and my husband, who was down the hall, and as I told you, was playing country western, was playing her favorite song, and he had no idea what was going on. God works in strange ways. He was playing Crossing the Bar. And as I listened to it and I turned, my mother's head was on the pillow and she'd gone. And I could take a deep breath and know that she had earned her Emmy. She had won her reward. My mother was a wonderful lady. I used to say, Mother and I don't get along because we're too much alike, and I have many times said, Mother, please forgive me. That's the greatest insult I ever put on you. But it was all right. It gave me a comfortable feeling with this exit that you and I are all going to make. And I'm awfully grateful it did, because I'd had chances to use it, believe me. Along with being helpful to people like you, my family, my AA family. This husband of mine eventually was to have open heart surgery and many other surgeries, and he stayed healthy, but his eyesight I thought was going. I became aware later that it really had pretty well gone, because he'd say to me, I put something here, did you move it? And I said, well, yeah, it's just up there. He said, when I put something, will you please leave it where I put it? And I came to know that he could find what he laid down, and I came to keep my hands off and not touch. Now, I had the habit, when I would leave from work, I left early. He always got up early in the morning to see me off. And as I say, I left. I was living out in Somar, out on 5. And he always got up and said goodbye to me. I had cut my hair all of the years that he'd known me. I'd had long hair, and I'd had it bleached, and I'd had it up in fancy hairdos up on the top of my head and whatever. He had loved it dearly, but I'd had it cut. I just didn't somehow have the time to keep it up any longer, or I don't know what the reason was, but I'd had it cut anyway. This is just something I'm trying to wait for the permanent to grow out, but I don't have to apologize to you for what I look like. Yeah, I didn't come here for a beauty contest. I didn't come here to prove to you I'm the prettiest thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, because I know better. So anyway, I always called when I left work, because then he could pretty well, it let him orientate himself, and he knew about how long it would take for me to get home. And he did the cooking and what have you. Did the things he was able to do. Thank God, God kept me letting him be useful and living a life. This man, as I said, was now 80. He was 15 years older than I was. We had a good life. We had 36 years of marriage. And he had put up with me through the very worst of my drinking. Well, this day I called and I said, I'm on my way home. And he said, that's good, honey, because when you get home, I have a feeling you're going to have to take me to the hospital. Now, this man was not, he never sounded like St. Valentine. He never said the things I thought he ought to say. You know, I could have written his script for him. Anyway, he said, you may have to take me to the hospital. And I said, why? He said, well, I've had rather a bad day. As I say, he'd had open heart surgery, but he had the kind where he was always in some pain. And I said, why didn't you call me? You know I could drop everything and come running home. He said, because, honey, I didn't want to ruin your day. I knew you'd be home when you were through. He said, I also wanted to tell you something that maybe I couldn't tell you to your face, and that is, I think you, as I said goodbye to you this morning, I thought probably you were the most beautiful you have ever been in your life. I think your hair absolutely makes a halo around that face. And I want you to know that I love you very, very much. And I also want you to know that I know you love me, and that we are very fortunate. We've had a wonderful, wonderful life. And I said, Roy, it's okay, I'll hurry. He said, you hurry, honey, because I'll be right here. And he was. When I walked in the back door, he'd gone on to his reward, and his dog was sleeping at his feet. And he had his hands folded on his chest, and he was sitting in his big chair. This was a man whose face was heavily wrinkled, and he used to say, "Everybody thinks I'm an old crab. What they don't know is I earned every one of those wrinkles." And as I walked over to that chair, there wasn't a wrinkle on his face, and there was a smile on his face. And I could stand there and say, "Okay, Doris, you've been talking about surrender, you've been talking about acceptance. Did you mean it, or have you been parroting the words all of your life?" He's gone to his reward. Aren't you glad he doesn't have to hurt? And I could take a deep breath, and we lived in a trailer park, and yelled, and my neighbors who were never home were sitting out on their porch. And I was able to say goodbye. And I looked at that smile, and I thought, you're smiling because I got to keep working my program, and you got yours made. Well, I spent a couple of years just sort of fumbling around, and then I did a brilliant thing. Met a man on the program, and I married him. And I was 25 years sober, and that man didn't remember his wedding. That was something. All of Alcoholics Anonymous in the valley saying, "What's the matter with Doris? She's lost all her marbles." Well, we won't try to analyze the thing. All I know is that by the time he died 2 years ago, he had nearly 4 years of sobriety. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Don't think I did. I don't think so. I don't think so. But he did find sobriety. And then they found cancer, and then he found his release. I told you there weren't 30 seconds of my whole life I'd changed. There aren't. There aren't. God has run every minute of my life. God gives me my hunches. God gives me my ideas. God gives me my messages. And the only thing he asks of me is that I can find just that much time to sit still and listen. I remember when I was brand new, I said to some of my masters, "What's the difference between prayer and meditation?" And maybe you know Jack Prose. He looked down at me and he said, "Doris, prayer is talking. You've done your share. Meditating is listening. Try to learn." I've established a wonderful relationship with my God. As I told you, I know his address. I took all the "now I lay me down to sleeps" that I had memorized and knew so well, and I put them up on the shelf. I think possibly the Lord's Prayer is the only thing that I recite anymore, except the prayer of St. Francis, which I ran on to after I got sober. And that was, I'd never run on to St. Francis. I was a Protestant. My father had been a bank examiner all through the Middle West, and we were whatever was in that town, in those small towns. Maybe you never lived in a small town, but in a small town there's a Catholic church. There usually was a Holy Roller tent somewhere, and there was a church. It could be Lutheran, it could be Methodist, it could be Congregational, it could be any of those things, and I've been every one of them. Every one of them. But you know, I never knew God in those days. Those days I didn't. Today, God and I are the dearest of friends. But I had been able, as I say, to recite the 23rd Psalm, to recite this, to recite that. I can't do it anymore because I put them in a box, and I mean a physical box. I got me a box. I took that box and I said, in this I want to put the things that I have parroted all of my life. My people over in the valley, if they're getting tired of it, it's tough because apparently God isn't ready for me to quit talking about it. I don't know how you feel about it, but I have listened to me, turn it over, first things first, easy does it, don't worry, God will take care of everything. They were words. They were only words. My prayers were only words. I learned in those trips from the valley to work and back and forth, I learned to visit with God. I talk to him as I would to you. I ask him every morning to please, if he hasn't got the time to tell me what to do, that's okay. Please, God, don't forget to keep me from doing what I shouldn't do. Please give me the God hunches that tell me, that's forbidden ground, old girl. I've had many, many wonderful, wonderful things happen for me. I have sat in my big chair in the living room, distressed over something that was going on and saying, God, I got to give it to you because I'm getting involved, I'm getting distressed. I know it's not mine, but God, make me willing to be willing to turn it over to you. Please help me. Please help me. And I have had the feeling of a hand grasping my shoulder, and looked down to see fingerprints on that shoulder. There was nobody in the house. No one. I have heard the whispers that tell me, back off, back off. I have known the feelings of God on that front seat every time I drive out of my driveway. I have come to know God. I have come to allow him to lead me through troubled waters to the bridges on the other side. I tell my girls when they say, what am I going to do if? And I say, don't cross the bridge till you get to the river. Keep things down to a simple minute. A simple minute. I don't have to pray at lengths because I don't have to ask for anything, or I don't ask for anything. My God has proven to me that he knows every single thing that I need. And he always gives it to me if I'll keep myself out of the way. And along with that, he's given me so many of the things I want. So many of the things. I learn two things that are important to me for whatever they are worth to you. As I visit with God, I must sit with my hands open. I find I get nothing with my fists clenched. But if I can keep my hands open, and I dare you to keep trying, you'll feel the hand that clasps your hand. And there's one other little secret. I must keep both feet flat on the floor. That completes the circuit. Doesn't have to make sense, but try. And if you believe it's absolute fallacy, I beg of you, please believe that I believe. Please do. My God is so real. He is so always there, so all the time. He'll see to it you have everything you want. Because your wants will become parallel with your needs. You'll never want, never. And the first time you hear his voice, you'll know that you too live in the kingdom of God. You too live there. I think I forgot in the middle. It's your fault, God. I'll tell you, if you leave everything in God's hands, when things go wrong, it's his fault, not yours. Keep it light. Don't make it too heavy. But I think he forgot to put it in the script, or I forgot to read that page. You don't know how I thank you for inviting me to come over here. You have no way of knowing how I enjoy sharing my God with you. My God, my sobriety, my life. I'd say God bless you, but I don't have to. He did when you came in to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I suggest, please, I hold my program in my hands very gently, lest I crush it, very firmly, lest I lose it. I love you more than you'll ever know.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.